I was doing the best I ever done, ever did. Then I started going through changes, and all of a sudden my days were not as bright. I was asking, Lord, what in the world is going on? And then I heard the song say, you're going through changes. Oh, but you say you want to change. Yeah, but in order to change, gotta go through some changes. So I started reading the Word of God, trying to feed my spirit man. Now I know I can't do anything, y'all. It's through Jesus. Oh, yes. Though I'm going through changes, I don't have to worry. In my weakest times, your strength will be revealed. Lord, I'm glad you're mine. I'm going through changes. Oh, but I say you want to change. But in order to change, I know you go through. Know you heard it, but you say you want to change. Understood. Gotta go through some change. So I've been praying. What you wanna do? That's my prayer. I'm willing to follow you. The fight is over. Whatever you wanna do, Lord, have your way. Have your way. I've been praying. What you wanna do? Use my heart. I'm willing to follow you. You can use my pain. Whatever you wanna do. You can even change my name. Have your way. Been praying. What you wanna do? Somebody got trouble. I'm willing to follow you. From your baby's mama, but whatever you wanna do, you ought to tell him, Lord, have your way. Have your way. You wanna be better. What you wanna do? Don't wanna be bitter, so I'm willing to follow you. Lord, whatever you wanna do, I'm still saying, Lord, have your way. Say change is good, and it's working for me. Change is good, working for me now. Change is good, working for me. Oh, I'm still saying change is good, it's working for me. Change is good, it's working.
Maybe a little confusion because in the King James it says the wages of sin is death. How do you hook that together? Well, first of all, understand the devil is not trying to get you to sin. He's just trying to get you to keep the law. Because if he can get you to keep the law, you will sin. And what many people think, they think Satan's trying to get you to sin. And Satan's trying to tempt you to do this or to do that. No. All he's trying to get you to do is to keep the law.
Oh, hell no!
No church, ravenous wolves and leeches. Crazy nowadays, most of the fools are preachers. Churches, camps, the occult schools and teachers manipulate the masses, they just tools with features. It's crazy how they love it when they hate you. It's crazy how they jealous cause they ain't you. These serpents, they pretend to be your friend, but you learn in the end that they always had an angle. On my shoulders there's a demon and an angel. That roaring lion looking for whom to mangle. Be careful who you make yourself subject to. Chain of command can be a noose to hang you. They teaching that the Torah is over and done, and that Hamashiach is really both father and son. Praising the cross, but I know if he was shot instead of that pagan symbol, then I bet they be wearing a gun.
No church, no church, no church,
Cause they only want your money, y'all.
no church, no church, no
Times
church,
got you looking like a dummy, y'all.
no church, no church, no church, no church, no church, no church.
Gathered, they with the master. Why is truth not addressed and sin not confessed? I'm crying for my people, wanna cling them to my chest. Pews filled and overdressed, smiling but overstressed. Understanding I don't meet, they still sucking milk from the breast. So yes, carnal minds can't ascertain the spiritual. And lost sheep go to the church for a miracle. Like the pastor is Messiah, but salvation comes from higher. Cause the word is so beyond the physical. Tithes, offerings, ATMs for profits. Twisting scripture like a ratchet to a socket. They idolize Paul and use him to be lawless, like his letters or epistles really greater than the prophets. But a tenth for tithes was only food. Study the Torah and you'll learn that they knew it. So how they say it's done away, leading people astray, but turn and make their congregations do it.
No church, no church, no church.
Cause they only want your money, y'all.
No church, no church, no church.
Got you looking like a dummy, y'all.
No church, no church, no church.
These four walls in a pastor.
No church, no church, no church.
Gathered, they with the master. Look, I could talk about this all day. I'm all for fellowship. But listen, family, be careful out here. These pastors, preachers, teachers, captains, these churches and religious institutions, a lot of them are misleading the people. If the person who's in charge of you spiritually isn't following the word, isn't being led by the spirit, and is too arrogant to receive correction, you need to get away from them people. Ain't nothing good there. Take it from me. Listen, I love you all. Shalom. No church.
No church. No church. Shabbat Shalom, family. It's your boy Solemn Prophet here with Professor S. And this is Shabbat Talk. Glad you guys could make it. Those of you guys in the panel, those of you guys watching on YouTube or Facebook, we appreciate you guys tuning in with us. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. And that song, man, it hit a little bit harder today for me. It hit a little bit harder because of what I'm going to talk about. But first, we're going to get into... I see you smiling over there. He like, what is he going to say? What is he going to say? Professor S don't know nothing about what I'm about to say, y'all, just to let y'all know. But yeah, so we're gonna get it started with giving the Most High his just due. So let me get his sound effect the loudest real quick. And you know, we gotta kick it off with all praises to the Most High, because he is the Alpha and Omega. You know, he is all knowing, all seeing, all present, you know, all powerful, right? You know, we wouldn't have this platform, these messages, you guys wouldn't get the message you're gonna get today without the Most High. So we gotta give him his just due, and he always gets the loudest applause. So all praises to the Most High. Now we gotta give my peoples my shout outs. I appreciate y'all for being here, and I want to recognize you. So, you know, the first one in here on the panel was Sister Andy, aka Sister Sponsor. So Shabbat Shalom to my sis.
Shabbat Shalom. How about that? Where the other people at?
Oh,
Shabbat Shalom, family.
I love your energy every week. I love it. Next up, the first in the YouTube chat was Sister Sandra. And you know, Sister Sandra and Brother David are one of our amazing married couples that be tuning in with us. So Shabbat Shalom to my family, Sister Sandra and Brother David. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, brother.
She said, I set a reminder. I hit the notification. He said, I'm about to finish eating real quick, and then I'm going to come right back. Yeah, Shabbat Shalom to my beautiful wife, Sister Ebony. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Shabbat shalom to my sister Ava, who's always she's so diligent, y'all. I'm telling you, she's so diligent. You know, you let her tell it, she be getting hard on herself and say, you know, all of these things. But no, listen, this sister, she's solid. Shabbat shalom, sis. I love you.
Shabbat shalom, brother. You got your linen on, so I gotta get my seatbelt on.
Yeah, I had to break out the linen for this message. No, I'm just kidding. Shabbat shalom to brother Sean, who was probably over there behind you. Shabbat shalom, my brother.
Thank you, brother. Bless you.
Yeah. Hey, Professor S, they call brother Sean Professor S 2.0. That boy was cooking for a while. He won like I think 4 trivia nights back to back. I almost had to put him on I had to almost put him on the same list as you, where he couldn't or he could participate, but it don't count because, like, man. No, but glad everybody's here. Real quick, just checking the chat. Anybody else in here? All right, but if you watching, you tuning in, and I don't know that you here, just drop a comment and I'll give you a shout out whenever I see you come across. All right. So getting on to the scripture readings for this week, we had Joshua 21:41 through 22 in verse 9, Proverbs 27:12 to 28:4, and Psalms 124 to 128. So I'm gonna all go at once now, you know. No, it was such a whole bunch of good stuff in here this week. Somebody go ahead and break the ice, which I'll get out of it this week.
So I wanted to go. I wanted to talk about Psalms 127. That had a lot of stuff in it. Psalms 127. You can hear me?
Yep.
It had lots and lots of things in it. It starts out by saying, except Yah build the house, they labor in vain. Except Yah guards the city, the watchman wakens, but in vain. And it goes on to talk about the children being a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
When you read this psalm, it just goes to, to show how important Yah is in our life. We cannot do anything, or should not do anything without him. And this is a perfect example. The Psalms just speak that with volumes as how important our Lord is, God is to us, the Most High is to us, to everything that we do, to our whole entire being. He's so important. We ought to trust him, rely on him, put him first in all things, in everything that we do. Because if we don't, then we do it in vain, basically. All we do it in vain if we don't put him first. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Hallelujah. Yeah, absolutely, sis. That's a great point. Great point. It's funny because me and Ebony just read this and we was talking about it. And we basically like just said, like, if the Most High isn't a part of it, then it's not gonna succeed, right? It's gonna fail. It's done in vain. It's worthless. Like, he has to be attached to whatever it is that we're trying to do or what we're trying to establish. If he's not attached to it, then it doesn't matter. But
a life without him is pointless.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad because it's not to sit and say that we sit and just watch other people's lives and judge them, but it's not judging. It's a sadness, I think, that comes over a lot of us when we look at our friends, our family, especially the people we love and care about, and we see what their lives are and we just think, man, you doing it without the Lord. Like, that is sad. I mean, it's their choice, because I believe all of us to be living, breathing examples of who the Most High is. If we aren't, we should be working towards it, right? And so when we see our family members doing and living their lives the way they choose to, it's their choice, but it doesn't mean it's not going to sadden us, because a life without him is pointless.
Yep. Yep. Did you
And
want
I'm
to add to
sure
that, Sister Ava? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I'm sure their fruit should be the mirror. You know what I mean? For them to be able to see that. But I mean, it's not always the case.
By their fruit you shall know them.
Yep.
Hallelujah.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I wanted to share on Lord Jesus. Psalms 128. That entire one there for me was a blessing, and it spoke volumes. Because it said, I do NIV, but blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him. You will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Yes, this will be the blessing for the man who fears the Lord. I was telling my husband when we read this, a lot of times everyone is talking about what men are supposed to be and what women are supposed to be, in a marriage, in a union. And so often everyone's like, oh, a woman is supposed to be a Proverbs 31 woman, but what is a man supposed to be, right? And when you see this and you see that this is what the blessings are for a man who fears the Lord, yes, it gives you like a template, right? Of what a man needs to be. But I was telling my husband too that without a man in the home that fears the Lord, you can't, it's hard to focus on being a Proverbs, not being a Proverbs 31 woman, but a lot of times you should hopefully see both within a union, right? It's hard to be a fearful man of God and be with someone that's not a Proverbs 31 woman, because how then do you have a wife that's like a fruitful vine within your house? You know what I mean? And same thing for the woman. If you're a Proverbs 31 woman, but your husband doesn't fear the Lord, how much harder is it then to, you hear it all the time. A lot of people say, how am I supposed to submit to a man that doesn't serve the Lord? I get it, but I mean, you chose him, right? You chose him. So you have to figure it out. But to me, it was a blessing reading that because I felt like just in regards to me and my husband's marriage, in regards to our union, to see that it was a blessing. So yeah.
All praises. Go ahead, Sister Ava.
Did anybody see that Sister Andrea had her Jamaican track shoes on? She was just out the gate. Sister Andrea. So in Joshua, there's a bit of a theme for me with promises being kept. First with the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh, where they kept their promises in fighting with the other tribes instead of just going and building their own land, building on their own land. They took care of their children and their animals, and then they went to fight with the other tribes as promised, because otherwise they would be cursing Israel all over again, like what our fathers did 40 years before. So they made a pact with Moses, they kept their promise, and now they were being sent back home after fighting, and after everybody else received their land, they got to go home. But even more importantly was the promise, the promises kept by the Most High that we read about in Joshua 24, verse 43 to 45. Because so the Most High gave to Israel all the land he had sworn to give to their ancestors. and they took possession of it and settled there. And the Most High gave them rest on every side, just as he had solemnly promised their ancestors. None of their enemies could stand against them, for the Most High helped them conquer all their enemies. Not a single one of all the good promises the Most High had given to the family of Israel was left unfulfilled. Everything he had spoken came true. And I mean, it just sounds like words coming off of the page, but to me, it's like it's greater than all these, fictional characters I'd watched growing up through, Sean Connery and Tom Cruise and all these medieval movies. I mean, if you imagine all of these things on the page of the Bible, it's like this is where they got their inspiration from. When you see all these men and how the chivalry and the honor and all these wars being won with nobody dying, praise Yah for that. They're fighting giants. It's like you think of movies like Time Bandits and all these other movies, Star Trek, Star Wars. You think all these movies are so great, but it's like, hello, Bible, 2,000 years, 5,000 years in the making. It's like, here's where they got their inspiration, people. It's not that there's all these great writers and everything that just come up with these things on their own. So that was an inspiration for me, talking about promises being kept not only by men but by Yah. And this is the Yah that we serve. He makes a promise to us. He is going to keep it. He's not like us. He's not like people in our lives who disappoint us over and over again, and we disappoint others over and over again too, making shallow promises just to get out of a conversation. Or we have good intentions, but we don't control time, we don't control the environment, but we serve a Yah who does, and we can trust in him.
All praises.
Yes, hallelujah. Proverbs 27:12. This one is for all my introvert friends. It's a prudent man sees danger and hides himself, but the sinful go on and suffer for it. So all my introvert friends, we got our hands up in the air like, yep, we know that one. And Psalms 120 to 134. Everybody here knows that I listen to the audio versions of the words. So I can't make any excuse that I didn't get to read all week. And I make a habit of playing it every day because that's how I learn. I have to repeat so I can get the word to sink in. But in the audio versions, it will introduce what it's about to read. Some people's Bibles have this, and so I kept hearing the words "Song of Ascents" with each of the psalms, with all of them. And so for Psalms 120 to 134, they're called songs of ascents. And if you look up Wikipedia for that, it'll give you a little description of it. So just in paraphrasing and summing up, it's like there were like songs of praise and worship for gatherings. So if they were going to high places or they were going to war, these were the scholars believe that they were used in gatherings and like songs of what we modern day people call songs of praise and worship back then. So I thought that was neat. And then I'm in agreement with both sisters about Psalm 127 verse 3. Behold, children are a gift of the Most High. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Now, where is it? Where's my reward? Where did he go? Yeah, you said he's. Where are you?
Where's who? I think she froze.
Whoops.
Oh, there she go. Welcome back.
Yep, that's it. Sorry. Internet got picked up. All right. Hallelujah.
All praises. Anybody else want to share from the scripture readings this week?
Yeah. I'll go with the Psalms 125, verse 1 and 2. Those who trust in Yahweh are like Mount Zion. It is not shaken. It remains forever. as the mountains surround Jerusalem. Oh, sorry, next part. So Yahuwah surrounds his people now and forever. And also, while I got the floor here for a minute, I want to point something out. I hate to be a Bible corrector, but I got over to Proverbs 27:13, and it says, take the garment of him who is guarantor for a stranger, and for a strange woman pledge it. And if you look that up in a concordance like Strong's or any lexicon, whatever, it'll say, it says in a lexicon, it says for a stranger, but in my version it says for a strange woman pledge it. So I'm curious, and I looked in the KJV, and it also says for a strange woman, which kind of alluding to, it almost sounds like a prostitute or something. But when you look it up, it says for a stranger, and so I'm kind of curious, like what other versions say, because
with that, a lot of other versions actually say adulteress, which I think is a poor translation.
Right, exactly.
The reason it would say strange woman there is because in Hebrew you have feminine and masculine words, right? So the word for stranger can be feminine or masculine, and if it's feminine, then it's talking about a woman. Just like in Spanish, you would say amigo for a man, or amiga for a woman, right? So
sure.
In Hebrew, it's a similar concept. You've got feminine and masculine words, and that's a feminine form of the word for stranger. So that's why it says strange woman.
So basically, it's for a foreigner, for a stranger.
Yeah, but here it seems to be indicating that holding it in a pledge, for a foreign woman is even more like you need to really hold on to it if it's for a foreign woman, because I don't know, but if you go a couple verses down, which I was going to comment on, yeah.
But what I'm getting at is it shouldn't allude to the fact that she's an adulterous woman. That's kind of like a bad translation.
It is a bad translation, yeah. No, because it's not necessarily, there's nothing really indicating that. A lot of translations do say adulteress, but because I looked it up too myself, and from what I found, it's not really saying that necessarily.
Right.
I mean, I guess it could be something that you might assume, because I mean, a lot of the the women of other nations weren't like Israelite women, you know what I'm saying? So
right.
I mean, they had their own cultures and their own things that they did. A lot of it involved sex rituals and stuff. So I mean, I guess you could make the assumption, but it's still an assumption. It's not directly from the text.
Right, and like my wife's point was, in Proverbs, they wouldn't. I don't see why they would be alluding to the fact that you'd even be involved in that situation. It kind of seems out of context. That's all I want to say. Sorry.
No, great point. And just to quickly add to that, when you were an Israelite during that time and you wanted to basically sponsor, because that's what this is, it's like a sponsorship. You're making a pledge to say that this person is under your care and you're going to make sure that they're going to follow the rules, right? You wouldn't make that type of pledge for somebody who's doing prostitution in that form. So even more so, based on the context and the Hebraic culture aspect, I would say that an adulterous woman is a bad translation if it's doing it, because a person, whether male or female, Israel wouldn't associate with such a person to even put their name, their reputation on the line, or somebody who's gonna, bring kind of shame or dishonor to that. So just a little bit
when they were being
extra.
righteous, anyways.
Right. So, yeah.
Right on.
Good, but definitely good point. Sister Ava, she stole mine, but it's okay. I appreciate you. Because I was going to give Proverbs 27:12, but I'm surprised that none of the sisters. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say Proverbs 27 verse 15. A continual dropping in a very rainy day and a contentious woman are alike. I was waiting on one of y'all sisters to bring that one out, because y'all be on point every time we cover them.
No, I wouldn't have gone there.
Yeah, that's actually one of the ones I was gonna speak on.
Sorry, brother.
Then it even goes on to say to restrain her is to restrain the wind or to grasp oil in your hand. It's like are you gonna grab some oil? You know what I'm saying?
Yep. I'm surprised nobody brought that one out. But yeah, you go ahead and share whatever else you got left, Professor S.
Oh, okay. So that was one of them actually. Then we know Proverbs is full of things that can be applied in the physical world just as much as spiritually, right? Well, we go to 22 first off. ESV says, crush a fool in a mortar and pestle along with crushed grain, yet his folly will not depart from him. It's like no matter how bad something happens to a fool, he's a fool, so his folly's never going to leave. There's other verses, reproof enters deeper into a wise man than 1,000 blows on the backs of fools. They just don't get it, and it's important not to be a fool. But let's see. Wait, where is that? Oh, 23 actually was something I wanted to bring out is know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds, for riches do not last forever, and does a crown endure for all generations? It's important to pay attention to things, right? You have to pay attention, you have to notice and be able to focus on things and know what's going on, right? You can't just say, oh, well, I've got this and I don't need to pay attention to any of this. I've seen businesses that should have been thriving and prospering go down the tubes because people just aren't paying attention. They're not paying attention to the numbers. They're not paying attention to what's really going on. They're just focused on surface level things. And like this is saying, know well, not just know, but know well the condition of your flocks, right? Because if you got sheep, you gotta know how they're doing, like really well, because otherwise they could get diseases, it could spread, and then half your flock die off, and then or whatever the case is, there could be wolves, and if you don't pay attention and notice that when you take them to this certain area, half of them don't come back, then you're going to lose a lot of them. And it goes on further in verse 24, for riches do not last forever. So you've got to, it's not like something that's perpetually just coming and coming and coming, and you never have to worry about it. Now you've got to really pay attention to things. And there's a huge spiritual application here as well, that you can apply, whether you're talking about your physical financial situation, or because back then herds and flocks were like your finances, whether you're considering that or even spiritually, it's very important to know well the condition of things, so that it doesn't get out of hand and out of control and get to a point where it can't be salvaged.
Absolutely.
And if you go down to verse 25, when the grass is gone and new growth appears and the vegetation of the mountain is gathered, the lambs will provide your clothes and the goats the price of a field. There will be enough goat's milk for your food and for the food of your household, and to maintain for your girls, maintenance for your girls. So it's, you gotta pay attention to things, and as long as you are paying attention, then not being a fool and being unseparated from your folly, as long as you are paying attention, then things will go well, Yeah. Which then comes to Psalms, where I was going to point out, which I believe Ava pointed it out, but it goes right back to how it all comes from Elohim anyway. So we've got to maintain this in a proper spiritual understanding as well, because it's all coming from Elohim in the end. And in Psalm 127:4, or not 127, I'm sorry. Where is that? I made a note of it. 126. 5, it says, "They that sow in tears shall reap in joy, and he that goeth forth and weepeth beareth precious seed, and shall doubtless come again with rejoicing." So it's like, yeah, things can be hard and everything, but as long as you're doing the right thing, you're eventually going to rejoice and have joy from it. And especially the harder the road, the greater satisfaction it is when you arrive at the destination. You know what I mean? Because as we had talked about previously in another Shabbat talk, it's the path getting you there that develops the character necessary to be able to maintain that when you get there. Because if you get there without going through the trials necessary, the hardships necessary to get there, then if you did, it's like how most lottery winners within 5 years they're bankrupt and in massive amounts of debt, because they didn't get there through discipline and proper work ethics. You know what I'm saying? They got there just like that, and then they didn't know how to handle it, and it's going through the hard times, sowing your seeds with tears, right? But then you reap in joy,
Absolutely. Yeah, I could personally attest to that one. So if you find yourself going through what seems like a difficult time, ask yourself, why is this happening to me? And then
what's it teaching me?
Pray to the Father and ask him, how's he loving you through that situation? And just prepare yourself to know that this is going to get you ready for whatever it is that he's going to bestow upon you.
Yeah. I mean, anytime I'm going through a hard time, I'm like, what am I being taught right now?
Absolutely. Anybody else for this week's scripture reading? But I just want y'all to know, when y'all pull out the things that y'all pull out, if it lines up with something that me and Ebony pulled out ourselves when we read it, it's just like, man, that's crazy. We was talking about that and that and that and that. So I find it awesome, man. Like, everybody's on one accord with a lot of the revelation that comes from the scriptures. Obviously, we can't talk about everything that we, notice, because then everybody will be talking up here for an hour, and then Shabbat talk will be a whole day. But I just love that, we don't always have to say it. Someone else is saying it or getting something similar from the word.
Mm-hmm.
But next week we have Joshua 22:10 to verse 23, Proverbs 28:5 to verse 34, and then Psalms 129 through 132, chapter 129 through 132. So I will leave that up for a second. You guys can Write it down, take a picture, screenshot, however you guys need to do it. Sister I would say about time for a brother's perspective. Well, see, my perspective is now. I can tell you that a man's life is much easier and much more rewarding when he has a righteous woman by his side. I would say that for sure. You know, there's all of these arguments about who brings what to the table and what is the woman's role and the man's role and all of these secular arguments and stuff. And sometimes they try to tap into the biblical, but they're so secular that they just screw it all up, right, with the arguments and stuff. But when you have someone, from a man's perspective, when you have someone who is righteous and seeking the Father, it makes everything better. The advice you get from them, the counsel that you get from them, the love and support that you get from them, it's all so much better. And it really sets you up to not only be successful, but it also brings you closer to the Father. A lot of what I learned in terms of my own walk with the Father, I learned from different things in life. When I became a father myself, so when I had children, I got a lot closer to the Father because I understood a new aspect of him that I didn't before. When I became a husband, it was another aspect that I never knew before. And so the interactions that I have with my wife kind of also help groom me and, you know, prepare me to strengthen that relationship. It's that muscle, right? You got to work that muscle out for it to get stronger. It's the same thing, but definitely from a man's perspective. You know, that's why the scripture says he that finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Most High. It ain't in the scripture for no reason. It's a reason and a purpose for it. But this week, I'm gonna be real with y'all. I might get on my soapbox a little bit, so go ahead and get ready. Like Sis said, you know, I brought out the linen for this now. We're gonna be talking about true evangelism. Now, I came across this a good while back, and I had a lot of other things going on in terms of studying and lessons and stuff like that. So it's kind of been in the queue for a minute, but I'm so passionate about it. I was reading 1 Thessalonians in my own time because I've been going through and doing a sweep of the entire New Testament. But when I was reading it, man, a lot of Paul's epistles, obviously they stand out and there's a lot going on there. But when I got to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and I read it, like something clicked that never clicked before. And it was just an overwhelming positive example, true example of what ministry should be, right? Of what a minister should be, of how we should walk and conduct ourselves, the mindsets that we should have, the actions that we should take. I mean, I'm sure you could probably go through the scriptures and maybe find a better example of maybe evangelism. I'm not arguing that this is the best example of it, but this was one of the ones that really stood out to me and resonated with me in my spirit about it. And it inspired me so much. I was like, wow, like I'm going to base an entire teaching on this one chapter, right? That's how impactful that this chapter was to me. And so, yeah, real quick, let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started in here. A true example of evangelism. A dive into Paul's ministry displayed in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. And like I said, man, I chose this chapter because during my studies, I noticed Paul's sincerity, his diligence, and care for the people during his ministry. And it inspired me and made me reflect not only on my own ministry, but also with others as well. And that others is going to play a huge role in this today. Like I said, y'all going to see me get on my soapbox. I might rant a little bit, you know, but this overall chapter in the lesson, it was just so profound, man. I love the Most High personally. Just speaking for myself, I love him, and I love what he has appointed me to do, and I love just being a representative of his kingdom, of his establishment, and I don't take it lightly. And so when I see people who are upholding that, and they are, soldiers in the army, so to speak, it encourages me. But then in that same token, when I see people who are claiming to be representatives of him, other soldiers in his army, and they're not truly soldiers, they're imposters, it frustrates me to the utmost. Which brings me to what saddened me about reading 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Today's climate of pastors, elders, and other ministry leaders who pursue money, fame, or platforms instead of what we were instructed to focus on is a direct slight towards everything that Paul is exhibiting in this chapter. It is the exact opposite of the example that he is setting. So today, my goal is not only to show what true evangelism looks like through Paul's example, but also to encourage believers to align themselves with ministry or with a ministry that aligns with this example. In addition, for ministry leaders to examine both themselves and their own personal walks with Elohim, as well as their ministries, and see if they align with Paul's example. Because if they do not, then they need to repent and make the necessary corrections or stop preaching or leading altogether. And I mean that with all sincerity. Oftentimes we read the scriptures or we receive a word from someone and it cuts straight to the heart because we realize, we might not be, living up to the standard that was set, that was set by the Most High, one of his representatives, right? And so we got to then make a choice whether we're going to make the correction or we're going to continue doing whatever we're doing. But it's one thing to do that when you're in your own, within your own walk, right? Because the impact is much lower when it's just yourself or yourself and those who are in your household. But when you are a leader, when you are a teacher, a pastor, a preacher, whatever, when you have a title or a position of authority, and you got people listening to you and following you, it's that much more important for you to make those corrections, because not only are you leading yourself astray, you're leading other people astray. So if you receive an example from Paul or anybody else that is, presenting or displaying the proper way to do and conduct ministry, and you're not in alignment with that, and you're not willing to be in alignment with that, you need to stop whatever you're doing in whatever capacity, because that's just not how we need to be representing the Most High. The Most High's people need good leadership and a shepherd that will not only exhibit messianic character traits, but also bear fruit worthy of the gospel. They do not need wolves in sheep's clothing, misleading them and or profiting from their devotion to the Most High. And we'll get into it, but I want to really get into 1 Thessalonians verse by verse, okay? So verses 1 and 2. For you yourselves know, brethren, and these are all in the RSV. I like the RSV. You can read out of the KJV or whatever version you're reading out of. I like the RSV. For you yourselves know, brethren, that our visit to you was not in vain. But though we had already suffered and been shamefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we had courage in our Elohim to declare to you the gospel of Elohim in the face of great opposition, right? Paul is talking about his ministry and what's been happening to them, and he's sharing that in his letter, right? So he reminds them of the boldness, right, of his boldness despite persecution in Philippi, regardless of what happened to them, what opposition they faced, right? It said they had to face great opposition. But that boldness and faith is what kind of stood out. You got to be bold in this faith. You can't have thin skin in this faith, especially if you're going to be a minister in whatever capacity. You know, if you're going to lead, if you're going to teach, you got to have thick skin to an extent, because if not, you're going to crumble every time you face adversity. You got to face adversity and be on the front line, because everybody's looking at you and they're wondering like, what is going to be the next move? And you have to be the one to show them like, yo, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. And so Paul is reminding them of his boldness. And then, unlike preachers today who fold under criticism, but they thrive under applause. You know, a lot of times when you see these individuals, you know, whether they're preachers, teachers, pastors, elders, and, you know, regardless of their religious affiliation, when things are going well, right, they love it. They soak it up. Everything's great. But when things start to go bad, people go missing. You don't hear from them. They get off social media. They try to, like, you know, hide behind, you know, their representatives, the PR teams, all kind of stuff, right? We see these happen. We see this stuff happening. But Paul is setting that example because true evangelism requires courage and endurance, right? 1 Corinthians 16, verses 13 and 14 says, be watchful, stand firm in your faith, be courageous, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. And this part right here, let all you do be done in love, is going to make a world of difference later on, right? It's a huge part of ministry. If you don't love what you do and you don't love the people who you are sent to serve, then you don't need to be in that seat. You don't need to be in that position. Verses 3 through 6 of 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. For our appeal does not spring from error or uncleanness, nor is it made with guile, but just as we have been approved by Elohim to be entrusted with the gospel, so we speak, not to please men, but to please Elohim who tests our hearts. For we never used either words of flattery, as you know, or a cloak for greed, as Elohim is witness, nor did we seek esteem from men, whether from you or from others, though we might have made demands as apostles of Messiah. So Paul's message was not of deceit, uncleanness, or guile. They weren't trying to trick nobody. They weren't trying to extort nobody. It was righteous. It was honest. It was righteous. And it was holy. Okay. He didn't seek exaltation, nor to be esteemed by men, nor to use flattering words. He didn't want clout. He didn't want people to say how amazing he was or how amazing his apostles were. He did it because that was the job. That was what the ministry was about. And he did everything to bring esteem to the Most High as a reflection of Messiah, right? Everything revolved around Messiah and everything revolved around the Most High. And so Pharisees, when you go back to the Pharisees, whether you're looking at the old Pharisees that served up Messiah, or you're looking at the modern day Pharisees with these pastors, preachers, and teachers, they love honor, they love greetings, they love chief seats, right? Matthew 23, 5 through 7 talks about that. The whole chapter, which we'll read to in a little bit too as well. But, you know, they love those things. It's about being put in a position of honor and, you know, being esteemed by people, and they want the oohs and the ahs. That's not what ministry is. In a lot of ways, and don't take this the wrong way when I say this, but in a lot of ways, ministry is ugly. Ministry is unrewarding to an extent. You know, you can spend hours and hours and hours, you know, working on something and not get a thank you, not get a, hey, I appreciate that, or whatever the case. It's very thankless in a lot of ways. You could, you know, put your hand to the plow and put together a whole bunch of different things. You could serve the people, you could feed the homeless, you could do a whole bunch of different things, and you might not get a pat on the back or a pat on the shoulder. But if you are looking for that, then ministry isn't for you. Because ultimately, everything that you do, you should do, like the scriptures say, you should do unto the Most High. And
Babe, I think when you're trying to explain it, and I completely understand when you're saying that it's unrewarding. It's not that we don't find happiness in being a blessing. It's it's like gardening. There's nothing beautiful in the beginning, of course, of gardening. It's a lot of dirty work. You're digging, a lot of dirty and tiresome work, right? Your body gets tired. You're out in the sun probably, because your work is to plant the seed. When you're in ministry, you're doing what the Most High has called you or asked you to do, and whatever that is, it's always with the starting of a planting of the seed, and whomever's in whomever's life. It doesn't mean you're going to immediately see what that seed turns into or what it looks like. You just have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely an aspect of the ministry, being, planting that seed and having to go through the turmoil and the hardship before it's, sprouts, before it grows into its own fruit and produces its own fruit. But
And
also
sometimes you don't
ministry.
get to see the fruit though. Because
Yeah,
if God
sometimes
has
you
you,
don't.
in some cases, God has you moving around and traveling and, you're just all over. When I say all over the place, I mean, you're not just in one location always helping the same people. So
Yeah,
you may never necessarily cross paths with them again.
yeah, true. And also another aspect of ministry is, sometimes you have to, you know, rebuke. Sometimes you have to call out wickedness. Sometimes you have to correct people. And not everybody receives correction the same way. Not everybody receives correction in love. Obviously, if you're doing it, you should be doing it in love anyway. It's not to just say like, you're wrong, right? But not everybody accepts correction with love and dignity. People get offended, people get upset, people want to argue, people want to fight, people want to, go on social media and drag your name because you make them feel some kind of way. There's a lot more to ministry than what's glorified in today's society. They show like the person, the pastor, whoever standing on stage, and they got the microphone and the lights right there, and then they pan the camera to the audience, and you see everybody looking up with big googly eyes, and they're like, that's my pastor, or whatever the case may be. Or they show them, laying hands on people and all of these different things. They like glorify it, but they don't show like the trueness. It's like you got to get it from the mud a lot of times. And when I say it's not rewarding, it's not always rewarding. Obviously, your reward as a minister of whatever capacity is knowing that you're doing the work that the Most High appointed you to do, and that you're following his instructions and you're following the example set forth by Messiah. And so everything that you're doing is unto them. That's the reward. Everything else is a bonus, but you're not going into it with the expectation of, I need some type of confirmation, or people giving you that good old the attaboy, right? Matthew 6:1-6 says, beware of practicing your piety before men in order to be seen by them. Okay. Piety is your righteousness, right? Your integrity, your how passionate you are about following Elohim, right? That's piety. And says, beware of practicing your piety before men in order to be seen by them. Now, it's one thing if you just the spirit come on you and you speak, you praise, you shout, whatever, and it's because you truly caught the spirit in that moment, and that's what transpired. But when you do it on purpose, just for people to see you, man, look at him, that's not what we want to do. It says, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give alms, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by men. Right? They do this too. And you shouldn't. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by men. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. A lot of times you see people, you know, they make these long, elaborate prayers and they try to sound so, you know, holy and so knowledgeable and so filled with the Ruach. Like, it's all for show. And the Most High sees through all of that nonsense, right? And so I'm not just only speaking to, you know, fellow believers, I'm speaking to other people in ministry as well. If this is you in any capacity, you need to change. You need to change. We shouldn't be like that. You know, whether you give something, whether you pray for someone, whether you're, you know, doing some type of ministry work, it should be focused on the task at hand and not so you can be seen in the spotlight, right? Like, that's why I love what John Baptist said when he was talking about Messiah. You know, he said, I come to prepare the way. He said, but the one that's coming, you know, after me was before me, and I'm not even worthy to lace up his sneakers, right? Obviously, we know it was leather sandals, but I like to say sneakers. Lace up his sneakers, or, you know, he says, I must become less so he can become more, right? I love that, because that was the ministry. His ministry, he knew what he was appointed to do, and he did it. It was about what the Most High had him doing. Verses, it says, true evangelists do not exploit people. They serve in humility and sincerity, right? Because ministry is service. Ministry is service. And when you don't love the people, like I said earlier, we're going to, you know, talk about like doing everything in love. When you don't love the people, then you're not able to adequately serve them, especially in humility and sincerity. Verses 7-9, but we were gentle among you, like a nurse taking care of her children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of Elohim, but also our own selves, because you have become very dear to us, right? Paul says they were gentle, right? That's the operating in love. And then he compares how gentle they were with the Gentiles in the ministry. It was compared to a nurse taking care of the children. And that they was passionate about the people so much that they was not just passionate about sharing the gospel with them, but passionate about getting to know them as people. They became friends, right? They developed relationships, and it made the whole community of believers, the entire church, more powerful and on one accord, right? He says because you had become very dear to us. If you are a minister and you have people following you and you don't care about them, if they're not dear to you, if you don't get a call from somebody and pick up the phone and it's them and they're talking about what's going on, and you don't really care about what they got going on, then you're not doing this the right way. You don't need to be in this. For you remember our labor and toil, brethren. We work night and day that we might not burden any of you while we preach to you the gospel of Elohim. Right? It says they toiled. So not only were they doing ministry, they worked. Because, you know, ministry during that time, it wasn't a financial like keepsake. They wasn't earning a whole bunch of money, but they had to work to provide for themselves, so that they didn't have to bother the people who they were serving. They didn't have to beg them for money. We didn't have to burden any of you guys. We just wanted to be able to preach the gospel to you. So if we had to work double time, so part of our time we were doing ministry and preaching to you, the other part of our time we was doing whatever odds and ends jobs, working whatever we could here and there to make sure we had enough money and food to provide us to eat, to provide shelter for us while we were doing the ministry. That sounds completely different from the people of today, the ministers of today, because they use the people to get to where they need to go, right? It's not like that. Paul uses the imagery of a nursing mother cherishing her children. He labored night and day not to burden them. We have to be willing to put in the work. Tithing wasn't giving money to the church so the pastor could get a new car. It was food and provision for the Levites to then provide the widows, fatherless, poor, etc., with the covering, with the things that they needed, right? You go to tithing, back to Deuteronomy 14:27-29. It says, and you shall not forsake the Levite who is within your towns, for he has no portion or inheritance with you. This is the reason why they were having the tithe. At the end of every 3 years, you shall bring forth all the tithe of your produce in the same year and lay it up within your towns. And the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance with you, and the sojourner or stranger, right? The fatherless and the widow who are within your town shall come and eat and be filled, that the Most High your Elohim may bless you in all the work of your hands that you do. It's not, oh yeah, we'll give 10% of your paychecks. Now, if you decide to do, 10% of your paycheck because you just want to bless, the church, or, as just from the kindness of your heart, you want to give a gift to the church or the pastor or whatever, that's one thing. But when they've twisted it and made it about it, that's why I played No Church before we started. No Church is really resonating, because I talk about, in that same song, I talk about a lot of the things that's going on. Right. And then at the same point, a lot of these people who are talking about tithing, they don't even keep the rest of the law, but this is a law that they keep, verse 10 through 12. You are witnesses, and Elohim also, how holy and righteous and blameless was our behavior to you believers. For like a father with his children, we exhorted each one of you and encouraged you and charged you to lead a life worthy of Elohim, who calls you into his own kingdom and esteem. So, the people who you minister to, the people who listen to you talk, listen to you teach, preach, whatever you're doing, who see you, they're witnesses of you. They're witnesses of your actions. They're witnesses of the things that you're saying. They're witnesses of the deeds that you do. They're witnesses of the fruit that you bear, because they see, the change within themselves, but they also see the change within the other people that are with them who watch you. And they can see other people growing and changing and being filled with the Spirit and getting closer to Elohim and becoming more knowledgeable, having more wisdom and understanding. So they are all witnesses of these things. And so, like I said, you got to encourage them. But another part of ministry is you got to charge people. You got to hold people accountable. And that's not always the most popular, trait. And that's not always, like I said, it's not always the most rewarding. You gotta charge them to lead a life worthy of Elohim. Not everybody wants to do that, right? And it's not saying that you're perfect, but you're held to a higher standard, and you have to hold those, around you accountable as well, right? Paul and his companions were holy, just, and blameless in conduct. He exhorted them as a father would his children, urging them to walk worthy of the Most High. For my parents out here, since you love your children, right? You should be loving your children. Since you love your children, you want nothing but the best for them, right? So when you teach them something, it's for their good. And so when you teach and trying to teach and instill in your children the ways of the Most High, right? That comes from a place of love, care, and just genuine affection. You are genuinely invested in their success, right? In their growth. And that's how Paul and the apostles were, right? Ministry is not about what you get out of it, but how you walk before others, how you serve them, how you lead them according to the leadership style of Messiah. John 13, 3 through 5, and then 12 through 17. It says, Messiah, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from Elohim, was going to Elohim, rose from supper, laid aside his garments, and girded himself with a towel. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. So Messiah knew at this point that all things was given into his hands, right? But even though he knew all of that, he still went and washed the disciples' feet, right? It says, when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Adonai, and you are right, for so I am, right? You call me teacher and you call me master, and you're right, because I am those things. But then he says, if I then, your Adonai and teacher, have washed your feet, you also to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. And it is that. We can't feel like we're better than anybody else, or just because we have a title. He had the highest title. He had the highest seat, the highest place of authority. And he still humbled himself and served his fellow disciples, right? His fellow people that was in the ministry with him. They were all at war. It was in the trenches together. He was the commanding officer, but he still humbled himself down and washed their feet, right? It says, truly, truly, I say to you, a servant. What I say ministry is service, right? A servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him, right? And this is also a play on the Messiah, who's saying that he's not greater than the Father, because he in other areas of the Gospels, he says that the Father is greater than him. And he also says that, you know, he didn't come on his own accord. He came, you know, because the one who sent him to do a job, sent him to do a calling in a ministry, right? And then it says, if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. So if you know better, do better. If you know these things, then do it. Put it into practice. And then verses 13 through 16. And we also thank Elohim constantly for this, that when you receive the word of Elohim, which you heard from us. Oh, sorry, that's verse 13 through 16. I didn't want to go to that yet. So going back to the Messiah real quick, if the Messiah himself can wash his disciples' feet, then you, whether if you're talking about you outside of ministry, just you individually, then you can humble yourself around others. You can serve others. You can care for others. You don't always need to be the top dog. You don't always got to have the last word, right? And if you are in ministry in whatever capacity, then you have to be willing to humble yourself, because you're setting an example for the people who are looking up to you. They need to see Elohim in you. They need to see Messiah's words in you. They need to see the gospel played out in what you're saying and what you're doing. And now verse 13 to 16. And we also thank Elohim constantly for this, that when you received the word of Elohim, which you heard from us, you accepted it not as the word of men, but as what it really is, right? The word of Elohim, which is at work in you believers. So he's saying when they did, right? When they did come into contact with these individuals and they preached the gospel and they talked about the Most High, they were thanking him constantly, because the people understood that it wasn't just words coming from men. It wasn't just Paul's opinion or any of his apostles' opinion. It was the truth, because it came directly from the source, right? For you, brethren, became imitators of the church of Elohim in Messiah, which are in Judea. For you suffered the same things from your own countrymen as they did from the Jews, who killed both the Messiah and the prophets and drove us out, and displeased Elohim and opposed all men by hindering us from speaking to the Gentiles that they may be saved, so as always to fill up the measure of their sins. So he's saying that they imitated what they were taught. They imitated the word of Elohim. They imitated the gospel, right? They were partakers in it, not only in the good of the gospel, but also the hardship, the tribulation, and the oppression that came with following that path, right? Because their own countrymen, right? We're talking about Gentiles. There's Jews mixed in too, but we're talking about primarily Gentiles. They were dealing with stuff from their own countrymen, people who came from their own culture. So they were dealing with that, similar to how Paul and his apostles was getting heat from the Jews. But going through all of that tribulation together for the same cause is just unifying, right? Then it says, but Elohim's wrath has come upon them at last. The people received the word, not as man's word, but as the word of the Most High. Paul adequately points out their wickedness. Modern leaders also twist scripture for their own gain. And I know we've covered 2 Peter chapter 3 in a bunch of different Shabbat talks, but this is happening. This is happening today. It says, verses 15 through 17, and count of the forbearance of the Adonai salvation. So also our beloved brother Paul wrote to you according to the wisdom given to him, speaking of this as he does in all his letters. There are some things in them hard to understand, which the ignorant and unstable twist and I will never read this again the same way, thanks to Professor S for pointing out that this word also means to pervert as well, right? So to twist or to pervert to their own destruction, as they do the other scriptures. So yes, it's talking about Paul's epistles, right, in all his letters, but it also says that they do that with the other scriptures. They read these other scriptures and they twist them however they can to try to justify whatever false doctrine that they're teaching. You therefore, beloved, knowing this beforehand, we already have the warning, right? Obviously, the people that Peter's specifically writing to knows this, they have that. But we, having the word, we have a warning that people are doing this. So we're reading that people are going to do this, and then they're up there doing it, and a lot of us are still like falling into the trap. He's telling us, beware lest you be carried away with the error of lawless men and lose your own stability. The lawless men are the unstable, the ignorant and the unstable, who are twisting and perverting the scriptures unto their own destruction. He's saying, don't be like them, right? Outwardly, they look clean, but inside they were full of iniquity. Messiah's own words comes to mind. In Luke 11, 39 and 40, he says, and the Adonai said to him, now you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of extortion and wickedness. You fools, did not he who made the outside make the inside also? Right? I know this is echoed in Matthew 23. We're going to get into that. So I'm not going to go too deep, but this part right here just makes sense. Like, the outward appearance of holiness doesn't matter. I don't care if you walk around with a holy t-shirt, dirtied up, battered, your pants all ripped up and stuff, but you talking about the truth of Elohim, I want to hear it. I don't care you walking around in a white, clean white robe, and you just look like $100 bill. But if what come out of your mouth is blasphemy or just foolishness, I don't want no parts of that. And I know a lot of times we can get caught up in appearances. These people put on, fronts for social media and their various platforms, and they look on the outside like everything's good. And then you hear about, whether it's months or years later, you hear that their lives was in complete disarray, complete shambles. All of these scandals then popped up, and all of their personal business get leaked out. And then that's when people like walk away from the church. Some people walk away from the faith. They put so much faith in these people, and then you realize that they were wicked, or they just messed up and did something that you thought that they were incapable of doing, and now it threw you off your own walk with the Most High, because they became a representative of the Most High to you. That's idolatry. Yes, I'm not saying not to. You can still follow people and listen to them and let them guide you and teach you, but you should always have your independent relationship with the Most High. I always say that. And before we go into Matthew 23, I wanted to play a video real quick.
Settling on not enough? Have you settled on having pain or disease in your body? God doesn't want you to settle. He wants you to receive. That's why Reverend Peter Popoff wants to send you the Miracle Spring Water absolutely free. Because when you receive the Miracle Spring Water and follow the instructions, your life will supernaturally improve in ways you can hardly imagine.
Who you think? 6.5 million settlements. Miracle Water came with what Popoff calls a bag of sacred Dead Sea salt. I'm supposed to sprinkle it over a check made out to Popoff for $27. It's really just a tiny package of salt that you would get at a deli or fast food restaurant. As for the Miracle Water, I'm supposed to drink it, wait 5 days, and I'll be blessed with riches. Of course, I'm supposed to send Popoff another check.
You see, it's not the water that releases the power. It's your obedience to the instructions of the prophet of God.
Lift your hands, young people. Fire! That's the glory of God here.
The Word of God is the gateway to the world of wealth.
To those critics that say that a preacher should not be living a life of luxury, what is your response to that?
They're wrong.
They preach something called the prosperity gospel, which argues that wealth is a sign of God's favor and donations will result in wealth coming back to you.
This man has been caught explaining to his thousands of followers that he needs money to buy a new private jet, an upgrade from his other private jets.
January the 12th, 2018, we took possession of the Gulfstream 5, and we give God praise for it and thanksgiving. It is debt-free. This is a debt-free airplane for Kenneth Copeland Ministries to do the work of the gospel all over the world.
If I flew commercial, I'd have to stop 65% of what I'm doing.
How much money did you pay for Tyler Perry's Gulfstream jet, for example?
Well, for example, that's really none of your business.
Jesse Duplantis zips around in this Dassault Falcon 50 jet paid for by his church.
My congregation is the world. I need the plane.
I really believe that if Jesus was physically on the earth today, he wouldn't be riding a donkey.
World Changers Church, which has numerous branches, received $69 million in contributions in Atlanta alone. Speaking to CNN in 2007, Dollar denied using church money for personal gain. Now, 5 years later, Dollar is looking to fly higher than ever.
Whatever you do right now, don't you stop tithing. Don't you stop sowing offerings. Well, they won't let us go to church. Well, email it in there, text give or something, but you get your tithe in that church. If you have to go take it down there and drop it off and stick it under the door or something, you get that tithe in that church, you get that offering in that church, and then you go home and you do what we're supposed to do.
And you need to make a vow of faith of $1,000. Oh, Bob, couldn't you say 25? No! You can't make a $1,000 vow of faith. I'm saying in faith.
We've seen midgets grow. We've seen arms and legs that stop growing because the growth cells that stop. Mandada basata. I don't make this stuff up.
One by one, his former followers are beginning to tell tales of alleged deceit. The latest, Mary Elizabeth Turk of Dallas, who says Tilton promised to heal her cancer if she would give him $1,000. She almost died waiting.
He said, I've got the faith. All you need to do is obey and send the money. And he said, because he was God's prophet.
She was so swayed by Tilton's promises of a miracle, she stopped her medical treatment. Died from colon cancer.
Grace Brulard was 8 years old when she was featured on an episode of CBC's The Fifth Estate in 2005, an episode that was specifically investigating Hinn's ministry.
If you could have a miracle, what would you want it to be?
That I can walk.
Just walk. Is that what you want, Grace? Just to walk?
No, just to walk.
Grace's mother brings her daughter to one of Hinn's miracle crusades, and just as she's about to go to the stage, she's intercepted by what are called screeners who tell her to step aside. According to that documentary and an insider, the job of the screeners is to screen out the people that are severely sick and ill. There's the story of Justin Peters, who is an evangelist himself and was born with cerebral palsy. During the Fifth Estate's investigation into Hinn's ministry, they attempt to get Peters to go on stage as well, and just like Grace, he is also intercepted by the screeners.
Our hidden camera shows Justin being stopped by a screener. Watch as Henry Hinn whispers something to her. Then Justin is told to step aside.
We are not asking you to give so the church can be blessed. We're asking you to give so you can be blessed. Some fellow said, okay, I was worth $150 million. I said, that's an insult. $150 million, that's an insult. $150 million, too small, that can be.
To send in $35,000. You need to send in that $100,000 check. If you do not write that P.O. box and you do not call that toll-free number and you do not become a ministry of sustainer, you will never see sustainment in your life and your dream will die. Everybody get a seed. $126 if you can. You say, well, Pastor Paula, can God do anything magical with $126? No, he cannot. But you're putting your faith with Psalm 126 that says, God, I believe today is a turnaround season for me. Everybody gets something. If you don't have anything, look to somebody around you that looks really rich right now.
Peter Popoff.
Gould, Alice Gould.
He knew their names.
Stand up, Alice.
As well as the afflictions they'd come to cure.
Burning this arthritis right out of your body.
He was exposed live on Johnny Carson by the magician James Randi for gleaning information from congregants using prayer cards, which his wife would read to him through a radio earpiece.
Hello, Petey. Can you hear me? If you can't, you're in trouble.
Jody Dean. Jody.
Dean? Jody Dean?
No, she should be right there on your right side. Okay, she lives at 4267 Masterson.
4267 Masterson. I can see the angels of God all around your house. For God to overhaul those knees.
We were seeing a postman named Don Henvey from San Francisco who has been healed now by 11 different faith healers of 9 different diseases in 7 different cities and under 2 genders, because as Bernice Manikoff, this man was healed of ovarian cancer twice by 2 different prominent healers, and he now has the healthiest ovaries of any postman, certainly in San Francisco, I can assure you.
Right now, Jesus, hallelujah. He's not going to need any more glory to God. Get up on your feet. Let's walk.
There's no pain.
What?
There's no pain. 12 years. There's no pain.
The healers say that God sends them to the afflicted, identifies their name to the healer. As a matter of fact, almost all of them have done this word of knowledge thing where they actually call people by name. Now, if God is giving them this information, God must be wrong, because that man's name was not Virgil Jorgensen, as he said it was there, nor was it Bernice Manikoff.
So, if none of that bothered you in your spirit, then I don't know what to say. But
no, man, it's terrible, man. And it gives a bad name to people who actually can, who actually are sent to do that. You know what I'm saying? It makes everyone think, oh, well, it's all just a bunch of false garbage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And then when someone is really trying to truly trying to serve, right, it builds up the skepticism for those who already, don't want to trust, any form of ministry, right? They think everybody are the crooks. They think everybody are the ones that are out to get somebody's money, or, to get the fancy jets and cars and suits and stuff like that, or it's trying to teach people false doctrine. And it's just more than this. All right, this is just small sample size. I didn't want to, play too much, because I cut that video is like an hour long that I cut down. And just in so many other ways, right? There's so many wolves in sheep's clothing, so many false doctrines being taught. There's so many people being misled. There's so much racial discrimination and division amongst these different groups. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I see Alex. Who's Alex? On the panel. Anybody know who Alex is? Go ahead, babe.
I was going to say it's sad because, personally having grown up in church, it's so funny because I've actually had the chance to see almost all of the pastors you have on there in person. Like I've, seen them, and it's sad because even outside of that, I've been to church services where I have seen, demons cast out and people healed and different things like that. But they were never asked for money. So, or they were never asked for anything. So, it just goes to show you the divide. And it also goes to show you that many people aren't, I believe, getting into the word and reading scripture. When you're looking for healing, searching for healing, and I'm using healing as an example because that's, one of the main things that was in the clips you showed. When you're, seeking a change in a transformational change in your life in regards to finances or, whatever it is, like, if we don't know who we are in Christ, even as baby believers, so to speak, as newcomers to Christ, right? If we're not even getting into the word to try and understand the word, we don't know, and we won't be able to discern, what's right versus what's wrong. You know what I mean? And too many people are depending on these churches and these pastors to be their doorway, their gateway to what it is that they're looking for, be it financial or physical health, healing, whatever it is. And that's a pastor or a church is not the doorway or the gateway to that. It's the Most High. It's your faith. It's your belief. Because technically, you don't even have to visit, for example, an establishment, a church, to get that healing, to get that transformational change. Is it beautiful if it can happen in that kind of setting? Absolutely. If that's the way God designs it for you to get it, right? But too many people are putting too much weight on the wrong side of the scale. And it's sad because, like I said, for someone who grew up my entire life, and I've been blessed to see it with my own eyes, it saddens me. I think I even told you once the story, but I remember when I made my return, I should say, back to serving the Lord after kind of just disappearing for a few years, so to speak. I remember I had asked my mom, because I had just had Genesis, and I told her, I said, well, I don't have any money, so I don't know how I'm supposed to tithe. And we were going to a small Spanish church, and she said, Ebony, she said, if you read scripture, she said, there's nothing in scriptures that says tithing is giving 10%, like exactly 10% of your income to a physical church, right? She said that's the way they paint it. She said, but essentially you're giving 10% to the kingdom. And she said, if you don't physically receive income, then ask the Lord what he wants you to give. Because he might want you to give your time. He may want you to help someone out in a different way. You might be able to bless someone. She was like, for example, Genesis is growing. And when she outgrows her clothes, at that time I had Genesis thankfully wasn't like a messy child. So I had a lot of her old stuff that she couldn't fit. And she was like, maybe, the Lord wants you to bless a family who needs that. And, versus like trying to resell it. And I was like, okay. And I remember I prayed about it, because I had felt very conflicted. Like, well, I know I need to tithe and I want to tithe, but I didn't know how to give back the way the Most High wanted me to. And after having that talk with her, it put me at ease, because, and then not only that, she had also stated, she said, if you're going to a church that you don't trust, or you feel like you can't trust that your 10% is going truly to his kingdom. And she's like, one, you probably shouldn't tithe there, but two, you probably also shouldn't go to that church. And thankfully the church we were going to at the time, I trusted them. And because of how I knew stuff about books and bookkeeping and stuff, I used to always help the pastors, and I was able to see, what they would put the tithe, the offerings and the tithes and stuff towards. So when I finally did get to a point where I could put a little something, I would. But, even now with us no longer attending a physical church, I remember having the conversation with you about like, well, I know we need to tithe. We may not go to a physical church, but we need to set, the Lord's portion aside and let him guide us and direct us on what we need to do. So I think it's very important. I feel like everyone should do that. You don't have to go to a physical church to tithe, to give to the kingdom. The Lord knows what he wants you to give. You just have to ask, what, and then how, you know? So, but yeah, I just found that clip extremely sad because I've seen all sides of it and been on all sides of it. So
Yeah, like the lady who was looking for healing and she stopped all her treatments and all of that. Now, obviously, the treatments weren't good anyway, but she was doing it thinking that this man who was lying to her, who was just trying to get money from her, and she ended up passing away. That struck a chord with me as well.
yeah, that's once again, you're putting too much weight on the wrong side of the scale because your healing is not through the pastor or through the church doors,
Yeah, absolutely. And so jumping into Matthew 23, where Messiah rebukes the scribes and the Pharisees, it says, "Then said Messiah to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So practice and observe whatever they tell you, but not what they do. For they preach, but do not practice. They bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with their finger." We heard about a lot of these things with like the hurricanes, right? Where people was trying to come and get shelter from the flooding and all of that, from the weather, the flooding, all of that stuff at some churches and these big mega churches. And these weren't just random people too. I mean, it was partly random people, but it was also people who were members that go to that church, that tithe, they pay their monies to that church, right? And they shut the doors, a lot of them. No, you can't come in here. There's a kind of like a old saying, like in the community, where the pastor, when the pastor needs something, he asks you to give money, right? But then when you need something from the pastor, he offers prayer instead. You go to the you paying, you're on a limited income and you're paying out of your income, whatever what the church considers a tithe. But then, like, if you get behind on the light bill and you need assistance, they like, oh, I'm gonna pray for you. Or even there's churches that do offer help, but they make you fill out all these forms, and it's just a whole process just to get basically. Like, if you really looked at it like that, like if you kept the money in your pocket instead of paying a church, you wouldn't have to worry about that light bill because you could have paid that light bill 10 times over. Just stuff like that. It's really disheartening. They do all their deeds to be seen by men. We saw in Luke when he said not to do that, right? For they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long, right? You see this happens all over the place, especially in the Hebrew Israelite community, right? That appearances, right? And they love the place of honor at feasts and the best seats in the synagogues and salutations in the marketplaces and being called rabbi by men. He says, but you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher and you are all brethren. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called masters, for you have one master, the Messiah, right? Sorry. Let's see. What was it? Verse 11. He who is greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. This right here is, it goes back to the example that he gave with the washing of the feet, right? He who is greatest among you shall be your servant. You need to come with the spirit of servitude. How can you serve? How can you help? Right? Helping other people should really bring you joy. It should be something that excites you. Right? It's so funny. Whenever we go to feed the homeless, my daughter is excited. She gets excited. You would think that we finna go to like an amusement park or to a water park or something like that. you know, but no, we're just going to serve, right? And she's excited and giddy about it, right? It says, whosoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. There's another part in the Gospels where he says, like, if there's a wedding banquet, when you go to the wedding banquet and you go to be seated, sit in a place of lowness, right? And then someone can come and then exalt you or upgrade you to the seat of honor. But if you go straight for the seat of honor, somebody can now come and tell you, no, you got to go back down. So while you exalted yourself because you was thinking highly of yourself and thinking you worthy of that seat, there's somebody that's more worthy than yourself, and now you have to be humble. But if you start off humble, you can be exalted. And he says, but woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut the kingdom of heaven against men, for you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you traverse sea and land to make a single proselyte. And when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. So they do all of these things. They make one proselyte, that's one follower and one convert, one person who's now, you know, choosing to follow the Most High. But then because they're corrupted, you know, corruption begets more corruption. Wickedness begets more wickedness. And then they make him worse because now you're raising him up in his wickedness, right? Twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. You're raising him up. You're teaching them all the ropes. But what does the previous generation always want to do with the older generation? Surpass them, right? It always happens. So now they're worse. And if you did all of this wickedness and you know, twisted the scriptures and you led a whole bunch of people astray, what do you think they're going to do? Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Right? These are these traditions that people were they were creating for themselves and embedding it within what they were saying was the Torah, which wasn't the Torah. Right? And the Messiah is addressing all of these things. So he who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of Elohim and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, right? Another example of what we're talking about, right? With the tithing. It didn't say dollars and cents. And have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cleanse the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of extortion and rapacity. You blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and of the plate, that the outside also may be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. And we saw a little bit of that hypocrisy and iniquity in the video that I played, right? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you witness against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers, you serpents, you brood of vipers. How are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from town to town. This is part part of what Paul was saying, what was happening to him and the apostles, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of the innocent Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly, I say to you, all this will come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is forsaken and desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Most High. And it's just footnotes with for the RSV when he's mentioned hell is Gehenna and such. But you know, that Matthew 23 for me is one of the most powerful chapters in the Gospels. Not because Messiah is like snapping, but you can really truly understand the spirit of the law, the spirit of truly honoring the Most High and following his ways and ministry from what the Messiah is telling. And you can see what not to do. You know, some of the best examples and teachers that we have is when we see someone that's doing what we ain't supposed to do. And they teach us more than sometimes the other teachers do. Right? When I was in the military, some of my best supervisors, where I learned the most about how to be a great supervisor or a great sergeant or a great airman or whatever you want to call it in the military, was really bad supervisors. They did everything wrong. And I learned if I just did the opposite of them, I would be good, right? In a lot of cases. And that is also at play here. Like, I love seeing the Messiah address that, right? And we can look at it from an internal perspective. I like to take what Messiah said and put myself in a seat of the Pharisees and imagine like he's talking to me, so I can do some internal, you know, inventory to see where I can change, what I can strip away, what I can, you know, become better at. Is it something that I was doing that wasn't in accordance with the scriptures, or wasn't in accordance with, you know, what I know to be true of the Most High that I just didn't realize before? Or was I being stubborn in certain areas where I just was holding on to something that I didn't want to let go? Like, that type of self-awareness and being willing to change is what we need to be focused on, because we're not going to always get everything right. And a lot of us, unfortunately, we've been taught by the wicked brood of vipers, right? And so we got to purge a lot of those things out from us before we can start fresh and then, you know, move forward and make progress. Sometimes you got to take a step back, recalibrate before you can take a step forward. And in verses 17 through 20, it's Paul's desire to visit the Thessalonians again. But he says some really interesting things here where he wraps it up. He says, but since we were bereft of you, brethren, for a short time, he's talking about, you know, taken away from you, in person, not in heart, we endeavored the more eagerly and with great desire to see you face to face, because we wanted to come to you. I, Paul, again and again, but Satan hindered us. Now here's the part right here. For what is our hope or joy or crown of boasting before our Adonai, the Messiah, at his coming? Is it not you? For you are our esteem and joy. And this just shows, like, evangelism is not self-centered. It is others-centered, focused on salvation and growth in Messiah. Paul's true joy, or what it says here, crown of boasting, okay, was not wealth or position, but the people themselves who believed in Messiah through his ministry. All of this was done through obedience to love others, right? I told you we're going to come back full circle. Everything that Paul did, he did in love. Everything we are doing and everything that we continue to do should be founded in love. John 13:35. I think it might have been 34. Yeah, 34 to 35. Sorry, the typo. This is Messiah speaking. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, and you also love one another. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So he's saying, one, I'm telling you, this is a commandment I'm giving you, to love one another, okay? And not to just love them, but love them as I have loved you. And we saw from the Messiah himself that example of love that was demonstrated. We covered one of the pieces today, right? With him washing the Messiah's feet. That was a demonstration of love. Even in Matthew chapter 23, where he was rebuking and correcting the Pharisees, that was still a demonstration of love. When you love somebody, you're going to call them out. You're going to correct them, right? We have to love one another in everything. And then he says, by this, all men will know that you are my disciples. People will know who you represent. People will know the team that you're on based on your actions. When you love other people, your actions move differently, right? When everything you do is based in love, it moves differently. It has a different look to it. It has a different spirit behind it, a different allure to it. And they can recognize the fruit that you're bearing when you are operating in love. But sometimes, especially obviously with the Pharisees in the past, but you got the modern day Pharisees, it seems as though Satan isn't hindering the types of ministries that do not uphold this same level of devotion and obedience, but is causing them to prosper. Remember, family, the appearance of success can be a fruit of wickedness and perversion, right? Like Sister Ebony was talking about, like she used to go to like a really small Spanish church, right? They didn't have $65 million to buy a jet. Think about that. $65 million to buy a private jet, or $25 million to buy a private jet. That's not talking about $65 million to build the church, to buy the land, to build the church, to, get all the furniture and, buy all of the supplies you need. No, that's just a jet. That's just to travel. You know how much money that is? You know what you can do with that much money? How much people you can affect? You know how many people you can give back to? You know how many people you could feed with that much money? But just because these mega churches look like success doesn't mean that the Most High is within those four walls, right? I know he's omnipresent and he's everywhere at all times, but what I mean by that is that's not where the truth of the Most High is found. These people are making money and they're getting notoriety off of a twisted and perverted version of the gospel. They're not teaching what the gospel teaches. So be careful, because a lot of times they draw, they draw the celebrity congregants, right? They become members of the church, right? They had a little VIP section that's roped off, and they be sitting and enjoying the service, and the pastor be giving them shout outs and stuff. Like, that's not worship. So again, for what is our hope or joy or crown of boasting before our Adonai, the Messiah, at his coming? Is it not you? For you are the esteem and the joy. For true ministers of the Most High, it's the people that you serve that's the joy, that's your delight. Your heart should go out to the people who you're out there in the trenches with. And your heart should go out to the people that you're impacting, the people that you're preaching to, the people that you're teaching, the people that you're serving. That's the whole point. It's people-centered. It's about his people, right? Messiah say the whole law can rest on two, right? Love the Most High and love others. But you can reduce that to loving the Most High, because if you love the Most High, you're going to love others. If you love him, you're going to do what all the other commandments and instructions that he gave you. And you can look at, majority of the commandments. A lot of them are people-centered. He teaches us how to treat people, how to talk to people, how to handle disputes among ourselves with people, with other people, how to come together. If we are in disagreement, how can we be reconciled back together? There's so much about it, right? And our love and obedience, to him and from him and for him is reflective in our own lives. When we look at our time today, it is hard to ignore the fact that many modern preachers, teachers, and leaders resemble the Pharisees far more than the apostles. Their attention is fixed on social media platforms, polished appearances, and prosperity messages that appeal to the flesh rather than to the spirit. But true evangelism has never been about image or wealth. True evangelism is sacrifice, pouring yourself out for the sake of others. It is about focusing on people, not profiting on notoriety. It is finding joy in seeing an encouraged heart seek a deeper, more intimate relationship with the Most High and to walk in his ways. And it is living a blameless example so that the testimony of your life confirms the testimony of your words. They aid, they provide, the wisdom they share, the love they display. In John 10:11-13, Messiah says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hireling and not a shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, he's not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hireling and cares nothing for the sheep. But the Messiah says he is the good shepherd, right? Professor S earlier said that we should really pay a close attention to our flocks and herds, right? From what was said in Proverbs. Messiah paid really close attention to the disciples. He's that good shepherd. And we should also pay close attention to those who are dear to us. If you're in ministry, you have a following, you have a congregation, you have people who listen to you, who follow you, pay close attention, right? Be involved. Show them that you care. It's not just show them that you know what you're talking about, or show them that you are knowledgeable of the scriptures, or that you can dress the best, or whatever the case may be. Be there, be present. Messiah gave the perfect example as the good shepherd. So we all need to take a deep look at ourselves, and all the more so of those of us with a title and or ministry need to ask the question, are we living like Paul and the apostles, or like the modern Pharisees? So that's it, family. Shalom, shalom. You turning your video back on, Professor S?
Yeah, just a second, bro.
But yeah, that's all I got, man.
Great lesson.
I was reading that, and it just, man, it touched my heart in so many different ways. If we think we're doing good, we could probably be doing better. And if we are extremely in error, we need to make a change. We need to definitely make a change, because it's about more than just us. We affect so many other people. And on an individual level, look at it from this perspective. You are a minister, whether you got a congregation or not. You're a minister to other people, right? We're supposed to be a light, right, to the world. This world is filled with darkness. We're supposed to be a light. You might be the only example that person sees ever of Elohim. And when he sees you, what is he going to see somebody who, is arrogant? Is he going to see somebody who was very disrespectful or spiteful? And look at it like, wow, if that's the example of Elohim, this Elohim that I've been hearing about, I don't want nothing to do with that. Right? Like, you might be the only thing that they see. So you should always operate in love, always operate in the spirit and the fruits of the spirit. Yeah, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for that. But all praises to the Most High. Anybody got anything they want to add, say? Any questions, comments, concerns about the message?
Thank you for the teaching, brother.
All praises.
Yeah,
Good lesson. Thank you.
I go and evangelize now.
Well, see, people recognize sincerity a lot more than most people think, and they also recognize insincerity, and it's pretty obvious when watching most of those on TV saying "cut me a check." It's pretty obvious that they're not really sincere,
But you know what I think the problem is, though, too? They all didn't start off like that. Because once again, I tell you, I grew up on them. What you see today is not what they looked like when I was 3.
Right.
That's how long these pastors have been in these roles. Longer than that, because mind you, even when I was 3, they were probably already 10 years in.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm telling you, because like I said, I've had a chance to see it with my own eyes. Nobody starts there. Everyone starts genuine and sincere, right? Because it almost comes off to a lot of people that you have to be when your church is little. You have to be, because you're at the sake of the donations. It's for the sake of the offering.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting.
The sad thing is people abuse the receiving end of how people feel towards your sincerity and genuineness, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm sincere and genuine towards someone because I'm doing that, I'm just genuinely and sincerely helping them and wanting to bless them. Their reaction towards me for doing that, I now take that, I store it, and over time it becomes something else. That's not what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? It's not supposed to become a play of power or to feel like we can just manipulate people because we have them in this hold of, they've seen me behave genuinely and whatever, for so many years. Now I can just talk, because they're so blinded by the so many years of sincerity and genuineness, right? Now I can just say anything because they're going to always view me in that light. Like, that's not what's supposed to happen. They didn't all start off this way. But when you take, how people say, money isn't the root of all evil. It's
the love of
money
it.
will show you money. Yeah, it's the love of it. But money will show you who somebody is.
Oh, that was actually part of the, what was that? Just as the water is a mirror to a face, so is the heart a mirror of the man.
Yeah, like money will show you who somebody is. When you're in rough times, my mother used to always tell me growing up, when you are in hard times, you'll know who your true friends are. The people that are there for you. You know what I mean? Like, so at every turn and at every instance, when you are in a place where you have the opportunity to take advantage of people and you don't, that's what shows true character. That's what shows who God truly is in your life, what he means to you, and who you are in his kingdom. They didn't start off that way. I don't think any pastor, I don't believe I've seen any pastor start off that way, because I've had the opportunity to see mega churches that were already mega churches switch hands, right? Where one pastor retires out and a new one takes over. Even the church is already a mega church. When you're a new pastor, everyone starts off genuine. It's crazy how it works. It's down the time. It's as time goes down, and as you go down the line, as the years go by, that you really start to see true character of who these ministers are come out.
I think a lot of them do too. A lot of them start that way, and like you say, they change. I don't know about everyone, but it's kind of similar to the politicians. A lot of politicians, they get started in the politics for the right reasons. They want to, they want to make change. They want to make things better, and then along the way, through various dealings and opportunities and things like that, that they become more corrupt until they get to the point where they're the politicians that we see in the spotlight today. Is really similar. But
either that or they get killed.
Yeah, either that or they get killed. But I want to give a shout out to Sister Chakma. Shabbat Shalom, sis. I don't know. Shabbat Shalom. If you ain't, just to talk Shabbat Shalom to Alex. And I don't know what that person was saying. Shabbat Shalom to Adam. I don't know if they was trying to throw shade or whatever the case may be, but we rise above all of that, you know. So we're gonna continue operating in love. But Shabbat Shalom to everybody who's watching, who didn't comment or anything. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, we do appreciate you guys for tuning in with us and, you know, getting this lesson. But anybody else want to share before we get out of here?
Hey, I want to throw my 2 cents in. Probably about what it's worth. But man, I want to say, like, even in the Christian world, I would agree. I don't think that they all start out that way. I like to think that two particular Joyce Myers and T.D. Jakes probably didn't start out that way. They probably got compromised as it went on. But I'm going to say I think a lot of them do start out that way. Probably unpopular opinion, but I think a lot of them are controllers who kind of push the narrative. They've been through the Jesuit system. They're trying to keep an angle on things, keep people caught up in the Israel state, this, that, and the other, you know. And man, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to call them. You know, I don't want to call them out or judge nobody, but I'd say there's quite a few out there that know exactly what they're doing, and they're trying to keep the ball rolling. So,
yeah, no, and the scriptures back you up too, brother. You know, we just read in Matthew 23 when they go and they make a proselyte and they turn him into, you know, his a devil coming from a place of hell twice as worse as them, right? So I definitely agree with you.
Anyhow, that's all I got. I appreciate you. I appreciate all y'all, family, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, brother. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And the Most High bless you guys, keep you, camp His angels around you, and give you peace. That is Shalom that destroys chaos, the order that destroys chaos. Love you, family. See y'all next week. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah. Oh, I've been going through changes. It's all good. Everything's going right. The prime of my life, I was doing the best I'd ever done, ever did. Then I started going through changes. All of a sudden my days were not as bright. I was asking, Lord, what in the world is going on?